The tides of change can move swiftly, and never with constant pace. Optor was beginning to understand this as he walked and conversed with a legend of his people, Lord Starwalker, formerly captain of the Expedition Draxus and ex-servant of the Claw of the Nine Wings, who stood a full 2 feet taller than Optor, having undergone 2 separate adaptation ascensions in his lifetime. Twice he had encountered powers beyond the vast metabiological knowledge of the Praetors, and as a result his body entered a state where the new powers were integrated, analyzed, extrapolated, and correlated against that vast set of existing knowledge. By the end of it, each time he had gained a foot of height and size, and was the paragon of what a Praetor could be in regards to that new power. The rest of the Praetors would now have an understanding of the new powers, with its secrets now understood if they could not call on the power directly. Starwalker had been the only one so far to have ever undergone the process, with the powers of the dragons through their knighting, as well as being the conduit for the very powers of the Nine Wings itself, being the 2 events sparking the adaptation. But as the moonlight reflected on their attire, it was clear Starwalker was of a mind that was soon to change. Change, and Optor's discomfort with the nature it was now taking, was the reason for this moonlight jaunt. Optor's suspicions as to the origin of the vessel he had found and used to escape the Intani world had proven to be correct. It was a prototype pathbreaker design dubbed the Pacification Model, designed to carry 1,000 or so Praetors with the full range of walkers and super heavy assets. It was envisioned to be deployed to worlds with extremely hostile and dangerous life forms, and to thin things out to a point where colonization, or at least basic exploration, would be reasonably safe for those that came after. The design had been shelved by the order of their creator, Killian Skychild, as he did not want a force of that size being assembled, as it would easily take many of the civil realms as it could easily take a death planet. Killian did not want the Praetors to be feared more than they already were, and was always wary of any grouping of more than a few dozen outside of the Lunas or the like. Thus, Optor had figured someone had merely dusted the design off and made a single example for his use. Normally, such a thought would have been hubris beyond the pale, but as he was a hand of destiny, it was a reality he had begrudgingly accepted. What he didn't count on in his wildest contemplations, that it was not just a one-off build. No, it was only one of 72 such frigates, as well as the capital-class vessel that served as their command and control hub, as well as carrier. 5 miles long, looking much like a 4-bladed arrowhead, with forward-pointing barbs between the low-bladed edges. Each barb and edge supported 9 of these frigates, serving as their docking bays and maintenance centers. The Vanguard's light was a Praetor vessel of unimaginable potential, with nearly 250,000 of his kin serving and now sworn to his cause. He was now in charge of a force that dwarfed any limits, hard or soft, laid out by their creator. The scale of it nearly boggled Optor's enhanced mind. With gear and equipment at his disposal, he was capable of exploring and scouting entire star systems, multiples of them, at once, or laying waste to nearly any known world in the realms, barring the interference of the divine or the like. Starwalker explained that this was but the first of many things Optor would need to accept and grow into. The command of the first Praetor Independent Collective, as it was a step in preventing a violent split amongst their kin. While most Praetors agreed with their creator that they should be guides and voices of reason and wisdom for the realms, but that they should not be in the van of exploration or action, there were many that believed the opposite, that they should be out amongst the stars, exposing themselves to the unknown as to counter any threats that could be greater than the other forces of the realms could be expected to be ready for. They were built to endure threats of that scale for a reason. Why not embrace it, was this logic. Starwalker explained that at the current time this was nothing more than a slight philosophical divergence. But, given a few thousand years, it would fester into far darker things. So, the choice had been made to allow a portion of the population to create their own means of achieving these aims by their creator Killian. And Optor had been selected to become the Vanguard Primus, the leader of this new faction. Before Optor could interject, Starwalker told him that things were still being prepared for. The Vanguard's light would serve as the catalyst for this split to begin, and the rest would follow, he assured the young Praetor. For now, his focus should be on the mission before him, Starwalker told him. There was a planet that had a high-value target that needed to be recovered, and most likely hundreds of civilians that would need evacuation. This was the reason he had been rerouted to the Primus, to be trained and granted ownership and command of the Vanguard's light. He would need its size to accommodate the numbers of refugees they were likely to find, as well as needing the might of his fellows to perform the operation. There were signs that there was some sort of hostile force at work, and one of not insignificant ability. As the moonlight faded for a moment, as the Vanguard's light flew between them and the Expedus Primus, blocking the colossal ship's vast numbers of lights from being reflected on the surface of the Luna Primus where they were standing, Optor realized that there was another target that his new vessel and crew were almost perfectly suited for. But before he could ask, he found himself back on the light, and facing a door that had no place on his ship. It was made of old-looking wood and was slightly cracked open, which through Trino's barrels following the now strong scent of roasted meat that had been leaking out of it. Walking in following, he found a small and private bar. Not one that he had ever seen or been in, but it felt familiar and safe. A short, middle-aged gnome was behind the bar, idly cleaning glasses, and nodded at the only occupied table, where an elven woman sat. Optor recognized her, and was in awe of another living legend. Varya Skywind Amasai, head of EgoCorps, the largest corporate enterprise in the realms, and a former Hand of Destiny herself. Optor sat down and smiled as Trinos made his way into Varya's lap like a cat, demanding to be given attention as she began to give Optor her own version of a pep talk. Where Starwalker had appealed to his desire to see the best for his people, Varya merely stated his duty far transcended that. He was a hand, an agent and vessel of the Nine Wings' will, and such his duty was to the realms, and if that meant he had to rise to the role of a leader, primus, or whatever title might be entailed, that was what he had to do. She was also clear that while the duty might be undeniable, its execution was his to decide. She told him to take this wonder of his kin's innovative genius and use it in the way it needs to be used, even if that is not necessarily the way it is expected to be used. He was a hand, and the fate of the realms was his to shape. But first, he needed to face and deal with the situation before him. Then, with his crew and ship bonded in the aftermath of this first mission, he would be better ready to move forward in his role during these times of change. A few minutes later, Optor stepped back into the hallway of his new duty and fate, turned and walked towards the bridge, with Trinos playfully flying about, with a lighter, yet more solid and firmer step. He had a job to do, and the stakes were only likely to get higher, so there was little use in not getting to it and being what the realms required of him. As he entered the command deck, each member of his new crew saluted with pride and was eager for the order to make way towards their objective. Optor found as he settled into his chair in the middle of the deck, with Unka and Lasar in their own chairs beside him. He was as eager as they and the rest of the crew were to see what was waiting for them once they arrived. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching.